I want to thank everybody who listened to the first episode. That was just the inauguration. That was just your initiation into who I am and to what this podcast is. So, to reiterate, I'm Brandon Phoenix, and this is the Raspy Voice Kids podcast. Really, it's the Raspy Voice Kids present Always a Mountaineer. And so today what we're going to talk about is what this podcast is going to present in the next few weeks. Basically, we're going to be talking about the subjects or the topics we're going to cover. And the cool thing is we don't have an editor. We do not have any kind of overhead management that dictates to us what we can talk about. So me and my brothers and my friends, we can decide what we want to talk about. And there are lots of subjects that we wanted to talk about for years. Lots of subjects that we wanted to hear media talk about for years that ESPN won't cover, Fox Sports doesn't cover, even local radio or local newspapers or local blogs have not covered for years that we will be covering now. And I'll give you some examples of that. Some things that are predictable, though, we will be talking about Will Grier. We'll talk about who he is. But one spin we're going to give on it is, does Will Grier understand the pressure that comes with being a West Virginia quarterback? Does he understand what it means to be a Mountaineer? Does he understand what we expect from him? We're going to talk about what's it mean for Skylar Howard's legacy, going from Skylar to Will Grier and the contrast between the two. We're going to talk about, does it even matter? Should we care that we've gone from Skylar to Will Grier? Should it be talked about? Should it be talked about publicly? We're going to talk about Spavital returning, the prodigal son. We're going to talk about, does Dana have the ability to not call plays? You go from being the guy who calls all of the plays, having the reins of the offense, and then turning that over to another person. Something that Dana has not been able to do even when he's had offensive coordinators in the past. And will Spavital be able to develop quarterbacks? Will he be able to find a go-to receiver? What that really means for West Virginia football here on out. And the other thing that maybe you haven't paid as much attention to, but really stuck out to me, is that coaches can be ejected from games now, just like in basketball. Is there anybody listening that thinks Dana will not be the first coach ejected in college football? We'll talk about that. Maybe we'll even do an over-under. Gibby. There's nobody who believes in Tony Gibson more than me and my guys, but he's lost 16 starters in the last 2 years. Can he overcome that? We don't rebuild, we reload. But that's a lot to overcome. And what's the impact then of the success he's had in the draft, the success we've had in the draft? What's the impact on recruiting? What's the impact in the locker room? We're going to talk about all of those things. And then we're going to do a litmus test. The question has been, is Dana a real Mountaineer? The question continues to be, does the black mean he doesn't love the gold and the blue? What do you think? The question persists. The question will be answered. And you can give your opinion too. And for some people, the question is, do you care at all? Does it matter if he's just a mercenary? But one way or the other, the question will be answered. You can be a part of it. And then sometimes it'll just be random ideas. We don't have to talk on subject the entire time. Like, it doesn't have to be specific. Like, we don't have to be in some kind of a box, because this is not some show. Like, we're not rigid. We're just talking, because this is just a Mountaineer family. It's just Mountaineer Nation. We can talk about when we're going to get those mid-90s throwbacks that we want. We can talk about who's better, Amos Zaraway or Steve Slayton. We can ask the question, something maybe you've never thought about. Is the gap between Rasheed Marshall and Pat White as large as you might think immediately? Or was it that Rich Rod's offense had evolved and the offensive line was better and the talent around Pat White was significantly better than Rasheed? Am I crazy? Is this even my idea, or is this just something someone said to me and I'm just sharing it with you? So don't go crazy yet. And remember, I also hate Pitt. Okay, so this is not necessarily blasphemy. I'm just sharing an idea that maybe somebody suggested. All right. And the other thing is, now this is off subject just for a second. This is off subject. And this is dead serious. I'm tired of people saying pineapple doesn't go on pizza. And here's why. It's nonsense, first of all. It's straight up nonsense. And here's why. Who cares what other people put on their pizza? You don't have to eat it. You do not have to eat what somebody else puts on their pizza. So if you don't like it, who cares? Why are people debating this? One. But two, pineapple goes on pizza. Pineapple on a ham goes on pizza. Plus, have you ever had pineapple ham, sausage, green peppers, banana peppers? Have you ever had that? If you haven't, you're missing out. And the place you go to get pizza is worthless. Straight up, I'm telling you, wherever you get your pizza is garbage. If you never had it and you didn't like it, wherever you get your pizza is garbage. And I'm telling you that as an unbiased person. This is neutral opinion. Where you get your pizza is garbage. That's objective. Don't at me. Whew! I needed to get that off my chest. I did not realize I did. I did not plan on talking about that. But what's done is done. We can heal as a nation, as Mountaineer Nation. And like I said, what's done is done. We're going to move on. And again, I also hate Pitt. And we can get back to the sports talk. Let's just move on. Let's just move on. We're going to talk about probably my number one favorite thing we're going to discuss. And I think that you guys should be very excited about this. We're going to talk about the Mountaineer Fan Self-Defense Program. Now, what is that? The Mountaineer Fan Self-Defense Program is more useful to Mountaineer expatriates. That's for people who have left the state, and there are a lot of us. So if you live in the state still, it's not as useful, maybe, as for people who have left the state. But even if you live in Charleston, you're about 2.5 hours from Columbus, 2.5 hours from Charleston, and there are a lot of people who still root for UK basketball. There are a lot of people who root for Ohio State football, even within our own state. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. There are too many people rocking Florida State, Florida, Miami Hurricane stuff. Not as much as in the past. It's not as bad as it was before. There's still too much of it. But even in the state, you might marry into a family. You might have coworkers from out of state. And you might engage in a conversation that requires you to understand Mountaineer Fan self-defense. And for the expatriates, as I've mentioned, if you live in a state like Ohio, if you're unfortunate enough to live in a state like Kentucky, if you live in a state like Florida, Alabama, if you live anywhere where you are outnumbered, which is a high likelihood, a high probability, you need to understand Mountaineer Fan self-defense. When somebody says something ridiculous like, do they still play football down there? How many of you have heard that? You need to be ready with the comeback. Because I'm telling you, I've heard them all. I've heard all of the things that we're going to discuss, and I don't lose these arguments. Not because I'm always right, but because I talk loud and I shout. Facts sometimes are irrelevant, but we're going to equip you with the stats, the data, and the ability to win these arguments, to shout them down, and in some cases, to make the peace treaties necessary to walk out with your head high. So we're going to teach you the Mountaineer Fan self-defense system. We have so many important segments that you're going to enjoy. We're ready to do this. This is going to be your favorite podcast by the time we're done. That's our goal. We really hope so. If not, well, there's nothing we can do about that. Really, we're just going to do our best. We want to have fun, and we hope you have fun. And the thing is, we want to make this a podcast that is interactive. So we want your input. Like I said, we don't have people who tell us what we can and can't talk about. So you can hit us up on Twitter. You can hit us at Raspy Voice Kids on Twitter. You can hit us on our email address. We're going to have all the information in our bio. There'll be plenty of places where you can contact us. And you can tell us, hey, what about this? Hey, what about that? Whatever it is you want to talk about, we can talk about. One of the things that I want to talk about is all the people who hate Marshall. This is something that really needs to be discussed. The people who hate Marshall, the fight and the conflict with Marshall, this is something that needs to be discussed at length. It's a subject that me and my friends have discussed for years that really needs to be discussed. And we also need to talk about retired numbers at West Virginia University. Can you name the most famous West Virginia football player? We all can. As soon as I said it, the name popped in your head. We all can name the most famous Mountaineer, but his number's not retired. You know who he is. His number is not retired. It is a travesty. It's ridiculous. We'll talk about it. That's coming up. Thank you for listening. But remember, if you listen to this podcast today, if I said something you didn't like, if I made you mad, if you're shouting at your radio or your phone or whatever it is you use to listen to my voice, my raspy kid voice today, don't forget, I also hate Pitt.